Good morning, everyone. Thank you for our the day before our last day of our devotional series. We really enjoyed the series, and tomorrow we're obviously excited about what we're going to talk about. But just like we talked about Wednesday, how Jesus didn't take a day off, even though he's dead, he really doesn't take a day off either.
And that's a true statement.
Yeah,
It's hard for us to kind of consider it, but Jesus is at work.
Yeah, absolutely. As Jesus says in John chapter 5, he's like, my Father's working until now, and so am I. And God in general is at work, and you can really see it with Father, Son, and Spirit. And especially maybe today, maybe the Spirit has more of an emphasis than it has, in a while since the beginning of the Luke's gospel. It's very Spirit heavy, and then you see the Spirit working through Jesus. But just because Jesus has died doesn't mean that there's not miracles and signs that are still happening.
That's right. And it's amazing that yesterday we were talking about the things that were going on, and especially the 3 hours of darkness, because it was placed within the crucifixion scene and that process of Jesus's death, and it was there, and it was an amazing part of it. But all that occurred during his life. He was still alive at that point. So we were talking about the power of those 3 hours of darkness. And Luke uses the words there. It says the sun's light failed, almost as if God extinguished the sun. Now that's difficult for us to kind of wrap our minds around. A lot of people say, "Oh, it was just an eclipse."
Yeah, definitely.
But there's just a lot of evidence that it was not that. The wording says that it wasn't that, and there's a lot of evidence that it was a worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah, which is crazy to think about. If you think of it as a worldwide event, you would think that, okay, well, sometimes in the past that's happened with, volcanoes or whatnot, but it has lasted a lot longer than 3 hours.
Right.
If you have something that powerful, it would not make the earth dark for 3 hours.
Right.
It would be much longer than that. And it just goes to show that, we try to explain things naturally as much as possible.
Sure.
That kind of comes up with the new era that we're in,
Right.
the scientific reasoning era, and you just can't do that with this. Right. I feel like this is something completely new, which kind of helps us because we need to start preparing our minds for the resurrection.
Sure.
So if you can at least accept this darkness portion, maybe you can accept what happens later in the story.
Absolutely. So we go on, and at the moment that Jesus cries out in a loud voice with this, it is finished, and then finally, into your hands, Father, I commit my spirit. Boom! 3 things happen in rapid succession. And that first one is the tearing of the veil in the temple from the top to the bottom. And that's just an amazing thing to think about. But what was the veil? The Israelites were commanded to build this veil. If you look back in Exodus 36, it says, he made the veil of blue and purple and scarlet. Now, blue is the color of divinity. Scarlet is the color of humanity. And when you blend the two colors together, they make purple. Jesus is divine, and Jesus is human. So Jesus of Nazareth, the Messiah, the chosen one, the Christ, is the perfect blending of blue and scarlet. The veil ultimately represents Jesus. All right, it says it was fine, twisted linens with cherubim skillfully worked made of it. The thread itself was made of gold in these cherubim, and this was just beautiful. But what they made for this screen, this veil that separated the Holy of Holies where God resided from the holy place where the priests served, that veil of separation was there. And it was 4 inches thick. It was 30 feet wide, 30 feet tall. It was massive.
Yeah.
And at the moment that Jesus died, it was torn from the top to the bottom. It didn't just fall apart.
That's right.
It was a purposeful statement at a purposeful moment in time of what was occurring.
Yeah. You wonder how the high priest would have reacted to this.
Right.
This utter shock.
Sure.
Did he think that it was significant to him? Did he think possibly about Jesus? Because I believe it was the high priest at that time he prophesied about Jesus.
That's right.
God actually spoke through him about what was going to happen. And so you have to wonder if he kind of has a rethinking of things. One thing that you mentioned earlier about the darkness, and we talked a little bit about the duality of the cross, about how it's a sad time, but there's also this glimmer of hope,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what the darkness represents.
That's
It
right.
cuts in half his crucifixion of like where there's a period of darkness and then there's a period of light. And I think it's going to get into a verse that we've been talking about a lot that has come up, and that's Colossians 1 verse 13, which is he rescued us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son,
Right.
the kingdom of light. And so we're going to see that a lot throughout this day.
Right.
But you can really see it there with that darkness, and I just realized that.
If
That's
you build
really cool.
on Colossians 1, the very next verse says, in whom we have the forgiveness of sins.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that translation
Mhm.
out of darkness into the kingdom of light is accomplished through the forgiveness of sins, which is accomplished through the shedding of blood. And
Absolutely.
it all just comes out just so richly through all of this. Now, you said that the priests were there, and what were they thinking or whatever they saw?
Yeah.
That was simply for their purpose, for their benefit. That
Yeah.
this miracle was done. It was in the afternoon. This was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We have the timetable of Jesus' crucifixion, so that when the darkness lifted and he gave up his spirit, that's when this occurred. That's the moment that the priests would have been right there preparing for the evening sacrifice.
Yeah.
And so they were all around. So what did they do when it was dark?
Mm-hmm.
Only thing they could do. Light lamps work in the darkness. Now the light comes back. The veil is rent. What was behind the veil? According to the old law, what should have been behind the veil was the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
Inside of the Ark of the Covenant would have been a jar of manna, the bread come from heaven, would have been the rod that Aaron had that budded. It was a miraculous sign that accompanied the spokesman of God.
Yeah.
And then you had the Word of God itself. They were all in there, and they were covered over with the mercy seat.
Yeah.
And that blood of atonement was always just sprinkled onto that ark. Where's the ark?
Yeah.
It's not in there. There is no mention whatsoever of that ark after the exile. You know, was it carted away and hidden? Maybe. Was it destroyed by the Babylonians? Maybe. But at this time, at the time that Jesus died, there is no Ark of the Covenant. And the veil rent showed, again, the ending of that covenant
Mm-hmm.
and the opening of the way directly to God. That veil was a barrier, but so was that high priest.
That's right.
So were those priests in the holy place. There was a process you had to go through and a filtering, and every time it got narrower and narrower to the point that only the high priest could enter the holy place.
Mm-hmm.
Now the veil's open. Now we have full access into the presence of God. But for those priests,
Yeah.
they looked back there, it was empty. God wasn't there. What were they doing? Did it impact their faith? But then we read in Acts chapter 6, many of the priests were obedient to the faith.
Oh, interesting.
How many of those guys saw that veil split?
Wow. It must have been a really emotional day for them. And, you know, we talked about as well as, you know, Jesus is, you know, they're looking at this old temple and they start to see it fall apart before their eyes.
Right.
The veil rents.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus is the one who's talking about, hey, you're going to try to destroy this temple in 3 days. I'm going to bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
And he's shown himself as the new temple
Mm-hmm.
where God's presence dwells.
That's right.
But it's not just going to dwell in him. It's going to dwell in his disciples.
That's right.
And they're going to also bring it out to the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes this new covenant so much better. We can go to God's throne of grace, as Hebrew calls it, and we can approach with confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Which before, you know, if you were a sinner, you couldn't approach with confidence.
That's right.
You know?
In fact, it was mortal fear to approach the living God. Even Isaiah, you know, was talking about that fear coming to the living God. I can't even speak. I'm a man of unclean lips. You know, if I see God, I'm going to die. The whole idea of that separation there. Mm-hmm. Now, once we're cleansed with the perfect cleansing of the Lamb of God, we can come into the holy place. We can come into the presence of God with confidence.
Absolutely. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. So the next thing that happened there was the earthquake. Mm-hmm. And again, rapid succession, but the earthquake isn't recorded in the temple. The earthquake is recorded at Golgotha. and it was breaking rocks open. It rent the rocks.
Yeah.
And so you get, it's not just a shaking. We were talking about this earlier. I've been through 2 earthquakes, both very minor, but both of them were associated with the shaking. One of them, it felt like we just kind of shifted over about a foot. The other one almost, it's like the earth was growling. And then we just shifted over about 3 feet. But you look around, nothing's changed. But you had this whole sense that the earth shifted.
Yeah.
And this one's different. These rocks are breaking open there at Golgotha. It was powerful what was going on here. And it said that the witnesses to it feared exceedingly. All right, so you go from darkness to an earthquake. At the moment when Jesus said, Father, into my hands I commend your spirit. And it just rattled this place. And it just brings our mind back again to that transition that's taking place. When Moses took the children to Mount Sinai, an earthquake accompanied the giving of the law.
Right.
God announced it. The earth announced the glory of God in the giving of the law. But that was a law that could not give life.
That's right, yeah.
This new law, also accompanied by the earthquake. The Hebrews, they had to draw that connection. They knew the account. And if they're honest, wow, this is God giving a new law.
That's right.
That would be the only conclusion that they could draw. This law is the law of the Spirit of life.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way you brought it back to Mount Sinai and the whole ground shaking. And the Israelites were like, Moses, you go. We don't want to go up that mountain.
Exactly.
We don't want to touch it. And they weren't supposed to. And then with the earthquakes here, this is when the centurions and some of the Gentiles, when this sign happens, that's when they start to realize it's like, this was the Son of God.
This was the Son of God.
And so they realize it themselves as well.
Absolutely. You know, what would our reaction be if we had been there? But God was giving an ample opportunity from whatever your perspective was when you were standing that day. If you were that centurion, if you were Mary, the mother of Jesus, if you were one of those Pharisees, or if you were one of the people passing by, or if you were one of the thieves on the cross, God gave you something during that time to focus on Jesus, to respond to Jesus, to see the magnitude of this. And so it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you think. This has something for everybody to make you go,
yeah,
this is out of the ordinary.
Yeah, definitely. This is not an ordinary day.
Then there was something that happened again.
Yeah.
You know, that torn veil, yeah, that's pretty amazing, but only the priest and everybody there in the temple at the moment saw that.
Yeah, and they maybe didn't tell a lot of people.
Exactly. You know, because I don't know that I would want to tell anybody.
Yeah.
But now you have this earthquake, so you got the people over at Golgotha and the surrounding little area there that felt it. But now it says that the graves were opened. Now, if we think back about what's going on here, this is the Passover celebration.
Yeah.
And during Sabbaths, during these times, these graves had to stay open because on Saturday, no Hebrew could do any work. They couldn't go close those graves.
Right.
They were opened. God knew it.
Yeah.
And God left them open until he was finished.
Yeah.
Because if you read on, it says that then the righteous saints came out. But they didn't come out until after Jesus rose from the dead.
Right. Yeah.
Those graves were open at the moment that Jesus died.
Yeah, so we have this picture of Jesus, Jesus dying and his spirit going into, the underworld as the Jews saw it.
Sure.
And as he goes in, it's like he immediately, I guess he greets these saints, the ones that have been faithful. Maybe it's the ones that have even suffered for God, and he frees them for a time, and immediately, so like, not only is our world being affected, but like the other realms are being affected as well at the death of Jesus.
That's right.
And he raises them up, and they wait for him. You got to think of, they're in the tombs and they're under the city, and I'm guessing that we don't know. I doubt all these came from the same time period.
Right.
They probably didn't, die on, Wednesday or whatever. Some of these people were probably literally just bones And it reminds us of Ezekiel 37 when we talked about it. So turn there. We're going to have our memory verse from there today. But Ezekiel has this vision. Well, God takes him to this field, and there's literal dry bones in this field. Like he's in a physical place, and he sees his brothers and sisters, and they're dead. They've been dead a long time, and God is talking to him, and he says, prophesy to these dry bones, and God breathes on them, and the dry bones start to come together, and then like the flesh and the muscle and the skin comes back on them, and our verse for the day, because it goes so well with what happens in Matthew. Starting in verse 13 of Ezekiel 37, it says, "Then you will know that I am the Lord, when I have opened your graves and caused you to come up out of your graves, my people. I will put my spirit within you, and you will come to life."
It is astounding when we read that and when we see that, to see what it is that God prophesied.
Yeah.
We know and we understand that this once for all sacrifice, in all, in understanding all, that didn't just mean that Jesus died for the people that would live after his life. He died for all people of all time. And so it was open to all, but the righteous ones, we're told later, the saints, the holy ones, were the ones that emerged from the grave. The ones, you get the idea of answering that call. So when the dead body of Jesus was laying in the tomb on Saturday, Jesus, we can never forget, had given his spirit into the hands of the Father.
That's right.
His body and spirit were separated. So we know what his body was doing on Saturday. Now we're looking at what was his spirit doing on Saturday.
Absolutely. We're going to see the spirit moving a lot. First, the spirit, it resurrects these people. And we don't know what happened to them. We don't know if they died. We don't know if they kind of vanished one day. We know that when Jesus dies, they go into the city of Jerusalem and they talk. And it's very similar to what Jesus is prophesied in Ezekiel, is that once these people, they're in exile and they're brought back to their cities, to their homeland. And it's like, this is what Jesus's mission has all been about. It's about taking Satan's power, and his most powerful tools were sin, his most powerful tools were death, persecution. But now you have these people who, are raised from the dead, who might have been, persecuted, and they're raised from the dead. What has happened in their previous life, what does it all mean now?
Right.
And Jesus is going to conquer death, and he's conquered sin, and Satan is completely stripped of his biggest tools.
That's right. And because now there was a law that could give life.
That's right.
It's the law of the spirit of life.
That's right.
It is a beautiful concept. Are we under a law? You better believe it. It is a totally different law than the dead law that produced dead man's bones.
That's right. So we get some seeds of resurrection today, and tomorrow it's really going to spring forth.
Right.
Quite literally. So we're going to wrap up our series tomorrow. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about the resurrection, so we'll try to make it as impactful and try to put in as much as we can as possible. But once again, we've enjoyed this study. Thank you for tuning in with us.
Yes, thank you very much.